Anger on the streets of Pakistan. Here, nationalist supporters furious at events in Kashmir call for revenge against India and its leader, Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
This is oppression. Human rights violations have been carried out. All peace-loving people of the world must stand by us. We demand that the Pakistan government and army take bold steps in response.
Jubilation for Hindu nationalists in Delhi. They say scrapping Article 370, which gave Kashmir its special status, corrects a historic wrong. For the opposition, it sets a dangerous precedent.
We believe that the presidential order on Article 370 by the Modi government is basically a constitutional coup. This is an attack on the constitution, and this amounts to burning the bridges which connected Kashmir to the rest of India.
The disputed territory is now in lockdown. Authorities have ordered thousands of Indian and foreign tourists to get out. Major roads are sealed off and a curfew in place. All communications severed. The Kashmir region has long been a bone of contention between India and Pakistan. They have fought 2 wars over it. Both claim the region in full, but control only part of it. China also claims a section. The revoking of its special status gives Delhi increased power and influence in the territory. But it's feared this could fuel the insurgency there, which has already claimed thousands of lives over 3 decades. Pakistan's government has condemned India's move, calling it illegal and vowing countermeasures. The United Nations is urging calm.
We are following with concern the tense situation in the region. We're also aware of reports of restrictions on the Indian side of Kashmir, and we urge all parties to exercise restraint.
But it's feared Prime Minister Modi has just reignited uncertainty and unrest in the world's most volatile nuclear flashpoint.
Joining me now to discuss this issue is Debarati Guha. She is the head of DW Asia's desk. Welcome, Debarati. First of all, does this decision by the Indian government come as a surprise?
Well, of course, it's a huge surprise. But, you know, something was already cooking because NSA, that is National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, was last week in Kashmir. So I felt that something is happening. But, of course, nobody knew, actually. And what surprises me even more is that, you know, in Doha, there is Afghan-Taliban-US talks are going on. And at the same time, this is happening. So I thought, you know, maybe they wanted to take the tension away. So, yeah, it is a surprise indeed.
Now, to what extent is this decision linked to the BJP's Hindu nationalist agenda?
Oh, totally. Like when Narendra Modi came to power unanimously in around like May, it was their agenda that they want to, you know, totally change Kashmir by making it, I mean, this is the only, as you said, only Muslim majority state in India. And there are loads of, for example, Jammu is a Hindu majority state. Ladakh is a province where there is Buddhist majority. So that was their agenda that Hindi, Hindustan, it is a package which is now coming and in this hour.
And Debarati, Kashmir has seen a lot of unrest in decades past. There's been a secessionist movement, there's been a separatist movement. And to some extent, Kashmiris feel quite alienated by the Indian government. What impact do you think this revocation of Article 370 will have on the people of Kashmir now?
I mean, at the moment, there is this totally blackout. There's curfew, there's no internet, no telephone calls can be done and made, and we have been trying to actually reach our correspondent in Jammu Kashmir, but we could not. And of course, in this last 7 decades, this was a special autonomous state, which is now gone. That means all non-Kashmiris from the other states of India can go there and buy lands and have business and get into educational institutions. So that is really, really tough on the Kashmiris. And I think that will have an impact.
And what implications do you think this will have on relations with Pakistan? As we've heard, there's been strong condemnation coming from Pakistan about the Indian move, which they describe as illegal.
Yeah, I mean, it is not only illegal. The Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, have said that this was irrational and this cannot be taken, and they would do everything to counter that. So obviously, we can imagine that there will be troops in both sides, and it is already a curfew situation, so it will have an impact, of course.
Right. And how do you see this developing now in the coming days? Do you think that, I mean, there are descriptions that this is an illegal act. Why do you think then that the government of India went past an executive presidential order rather than go through the parliament?
Well, they passed this presidential decree, you know, and I think it is maybe the Indian government or the BJP-prone government have been doing a study for the last few weeks or few months or a few years maybe, because none of the other government have dared to do that, to change that. And I think it is not maybe unconstitutional, but it is definitely undemocratic. So people were not involved. Most of the former chief ministers are put into house arrest, and they did this without talking with the people. So this will, of course, affect each other, both the countries, and I'm literally scared what will happen now. But we have to keep an eye.
Right. Devriyati Guha, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Amrita.
Manoj Joshi is a leading security analyst from the Observer Research Foundation in Delhi. Manoj, good to have you with us. How do you see things developing on the ground in Kashmir after this announcement?
Well, I think certainly in the Kashmir Valley, there will be a sense of bewilderment and of shock. The Article 370 in itself did not mean much. It had been hollowed out over the years. Various provisions had been undermined, but it was an important symbol for the Kashmiri people. It is a symbol that they were unique. They're the only state where the Muslims are a majority. So that symbol has been taken down, and I think that is something which is going to be a bit of a psychological shock to them.
And Shiva, and responding to this psychological shock, as you put it, a former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, called it, I quote, the darkest day in Indian democracy. And she further went on to warn that there could be catastrophic consequences for the subcontinent. Does she have a point?
Well, you know, that may be stretching it a bit far because, you know, as far as Kashmir is concerned, it has already seen a huge amount of violence. And so, yes, there will be a huge amount of discontent. There will be protest. That's why the authorities are prepared for it. They've sent more police forces, army forces. I think in the short term, they will keep a lid on it. But what is, I think, the problem is the question of longer-term alienation. In the sense, all said and done, Kashmir has gone through this since the 1990s. There's been an insurgency there. That insurgency has been more or less defeated. And you had a large section of the population, the so-called silent majority, which essentially went along with the idea that Kashmir was part of India. And the separatists were actually in a minority.
Right.
Now I'm afraid there's going to be some bewilderment and there's some sense that they have lost something. Now, in fact, that loss had already taken place. But the point is the psychological shock of being told that, look, you're like anyone else.
Right.
Your state there's nothing unique about it. That is going to have the impact.
What does that say, Manoj, about the BJP government's strategy to handle Kashmir? Do they have a strategy? If so, what is it?
Well, you know, the thing is that the BJP's foundational ideology has been that Kashmir should not have a special status. So this is something which is a very important part, this very founding of the BJP, of the Janasangh was based on this, was a movement in Kashmir opposing this special status. So in one sense, it's the fulfillment of that. And you can be sure that it will have widespread support across the country. In the country, there is a certain amount of Kashmir fatigue, and people are going to say, well, you know, for 70 years, we've tried to be nice. It hasn't worked, and so this is if this has to be a drastic solution, so be it. And so people will hail the government. Already you've seen the reaction of political parties, many of the political parties in the south actually supporting the BJP. And I suspect the same support will be there right across the country as well.
Manoj Joshi from the Observer Research Foundation speaking to us from Delhi. Thank you very much for that analysis.